It slipped his mind again that his eyes seemed to have fallen shut. What he did notice, though, was a light touch on his shoulder. As if hit by an arrow, his eyelids sprang open. In the same second, he had drawn the longsword, so far that a piece of the edge was peeking out of the scabbard, and pressed it against his attacker's throat and both the latter against the nearest beam. Only to realize that he was looking into the eyes of the local farmer's daughter, who stared at him silently with quivering lips and a strangled cry in her throat. His gaze studied her face as if it was difficult for him to judge whether this was still a dream or reality. But at last he sheathed the blade again, took a step backwards and murmured, "Beg pardon."
I thought you were going to."
"Why should I?" he replied firmly. "It's from the knights out there." With a nod of his head he gestured out the open barn door behind him, through which the orange-red light of the morning fell. "Mind you, you wouldn't touch a wild sleeping animal either, would you?"
Honestly, I don't know."
"My advice, you should avoid doing it." With these words he started to strap on his weapons again, the long sword on his left hip, the short sword above it, the bow shouldered, the dagger at the back by his hip, and the quiver on the right.
"You were just so hidden and silent. As I spoke you did not hear, so I thought."
"That was a stupid idea."
"Oh yeah?"
Now she tightened her upper body and put her fists on her hips.
"Maybe it was also a stupid idea to harbor such an unfriendly guy like you."
"Perhaps. But I'm not ungrateful for the night I was allowed to spend here with my companion." The maid looked at him for a while, as if she had expected every other reaction except this one. Then she jutted her chin and turned away. Before she had gone out the barn door, however, she paused and turned back.
"My father told me that you should leave the farm today. You would need the space here in the barn."
The wanderer smiled wearily. "Ah, yes."
"Ah, yes?"
she repeated, and he immediately replied, "Your father need not worry. I will be gone in a moment."
But...
The wanderer was just about to motivate the horse that their miserable path would now lead them on, when he looked over his shoulder at her, leash in hand.
"Well,"
she tried to continue. "Well," he repeated, her lips tucked to the left corner of her mouth. "Out with it."
"Well, it's about your companion."
At these words he looked to the Frisian. "What about him?"
Well, it's like this. Today someone is coming who knows about animals. To examine the animals on my father's estate, you know."
"What's that got to do with this?"
I persuaded my father to let you stay. Just long enough for the crack to have a look at your stallion too."
At these words she picked up an empty tub, held it under her arm against her hip, and pertly sat on her way out.
"For the sake of the animal, of course."
When she was out, the wanderer tapped the Frisian on the shoulder with his backhand. "Hey, it almost seems to me as if you are well received by women." The horse snorted. "Just do me the favor of leaving the poor fellow who will take care of you in one piece." The rat grumbled, rubbing the grey stubble on his chin.
"Well, I state that it is a simple fracture in and of itself. No major difficulty. But the repeated use of the leg must have caused the broken bone to penetrate the tissue and, as I suspect, once out of the skin. That's how the wound got infected."
His gaze now reached the wanderer.
"Don't you know that you should first get a specialist before you try to fix the fracture yourself? You are causing the animal avoidable pain."
The wanderer felt the reproachful looks resting on him. Only the horses seemed to look at him with curiosity. "Well," he began to reply, "what I can say is that he's smart enough not to put any weight on the leg. Also, he's got a darn strong mind, because he eats. He won't give up." He saved mentioning that it took some encouragement from his side to do so first.
"Well, at least you change the bandage regularly. I've cleaned the wound as best as I can. The rest is really up to you two now. Although..."
He looked at the wanderer in a way that said in silent words that it would probably be best for the animal to have another owner. The wanderer could feel the glances of the maid and the landlord stabbing him in the back. He ran his tongue over his lips, then chirruped once and said, "I feel I should be on my way. I've been a burden to you all long enough. What do I owe you?" The rat shook his head.
"I did it for this magnificent animal. Really a beautiful Frisian, you stallion. You should take better care of him, truly."
The young man tapped his fist twice on his chest. "I'll do my best."
"I hope so,"
the maid interjected just before the vet continued.
"It will take weeks for the leg to heal completely, and even then it shouldn't be put under full weight immediately. First of all, you should slowly get the animal used to walking again. The necessary rest until then, and also afterwards, is indispensable.
The wanderer nodded and then turned to the landlord. He bowed to him and spoke. I'm in your debt. If you are in need, then my sword shall help you. We do not need your boorish ways here. Just see that you get out there and take care of the beast sensibly this time, or it will be Thor and we will have to help you. The wanderer rose again and looked at him seriously. I understand, was his reply finally, before he slowly started on his way with the stallion and Tau.
Actually,
The vet spoke, turning to the farmer as they watched the two leave.
he shouldn't move the animal at all. It should rest completely, but he spoke widely for it. Really seems to be clever enough and to know that it should not put its leg down if it wants it healed again. Truly amazing horse that he owns.
It was just the two of them again in the evening. The fire crackled away and somewhere nearby a crow sang its lonely song. The setting sun colored the horizon a glowing orange red, as could only be seen at this time of year. It almost seemed as if the vet had taken a curse of them. It was the first night since their first meeting in which the wind did not strike at them, and it was the first night of the new year that was upon them. Fitting, the wanderer thought to himself. He had his new companion, and his new companion seemingly a future without pain, or at least without aching legs.
Why do you do that?
He heard the maid's voice ask. He was not surprised. He had heard her sneaking up on him, or rather, her attempt to do so. You seem to be looking for danger, he answered her dryly. You'll find it one day, you know. Probably sooner than you'd like if you keep this up.
You have not answered my question.
Oh yes, I did. Actually, that was an answer. Maybe not one you like, but...
You should give the animal to someone who loves it.
Just at that moment, a breeze blew, causing the flames to swing around briefly, as if Thorvin himself had given her words the power to do so. Ah, the wanderer nodded. That is why you have come.
I want to know why you treat the animal so badly. What has the horse done to you? It has carried you faithfully and...
Enough! The shout had such force that she felt reminded of the morning when he had held the blade to her throat. With the head pulled back into the cover of her shoulders, she stood there, like a deer that had stumbled in front of the hunter's crossbow. After taking a deep breath, the wanderer spoke. For your information, I have not even sat on the horse. I took it off a farmer near Gottingham. There, the stallion was a racehorse that ran under the name Nightstorm. I heard about it when I was in a tavern and the nimble weasel. He stared, and it seemed to her that it passed her by. So she looked behind her, but there was no one there.
Why did you stop?
He shook his head. Not that important. In the minutes that followed, he shared with her the story of how he had come upon the horse. She put the tippet tighter around herself when he had finished, so that it covered her neck completely.
Why didn't you say anything when you were reproached like that?
And when he smirked, she cried out,
What's so funny about that?
Is that almost a pall I saw on your face just now?
And what if it were, huh?
The wanderer kept his grin, but to her it looked like he suddenly had significantly more age on him, even though he looked so young. Then he asked, Would you have believed me then? She was astonished herself that she paused. I'm not accusing you of anything, you know, but I've seen it often enough. People who are on fire with their convictions and let little to nothing dissuade them. And among that little to nothing can such a down-and-out fellow in rags hardly be found. He noticed when she held out her hand to him. What is this?
My name is Sienna. I'd like to start from the beginning.
She startled when he slapped her hand away. It didn't hurt much, physically at least. Suddenly his gaze was like that of a snarling wolf to her. You should not seek friendship with a monster. With a nudge of his head, he pointed back in the direction she had come from. Turn back. Walk straight, and before the sun has set you should be back home.
Oh, you speak like my father.
Then listen to him. You don't know me. I might as well rape you. These words clearly had an effect. Now the appall is really written all over your face. It clapped. She had slapped him. Then she straightened up and walked away. The first few steps, anyway, before she stopped short, looked over her shoulder just enough to spot him in the far corner of her field of vision, and spoke.
When you have learned what manners are, you are welcome to come by again. Perhaps I would even be pleased.
The Frisian snorted when she was no more than a tiny speck in the distance, barely larger than the tip of a little finger with arm outstretched. The wind picked up a bit.
Seems our luck has run out again,
the wanderer spoke. He had propped his elbows on his knees drawn up to his body with his forearms hanging between them, and so he stared into the fire. In his mind, he gave nature the middle finger, or whoever was responsible for the wind. Soon he was so cold again that his body shivered. At least he was lucky enough not to have made any further acquaintance with the consecrated plate, or, if anyone would be merciful to him, God forbid, one of the 4 venerable ones, or even, no. He didn't even want to think about that. As he put the cloak over the horse, he couldn't help but notice that it didn't snap at him.
Hey,
he grumbled.
Something like distant gratitude, that I get to experience something like that.
And just as he was about to prepare himself for another miserable night of waking sleep, the horse's muzzle nudged his right shoulder, causing him to fall on its flank. The wanderer quickly propped himself up on all fours and eyed the animal suspiciously.
What are you doing?
He asked, almost growling. The green eyes of the Frisian returned his gaze, but this time with, was that loyalty?
Just not that,
he muttered, but the animal remained so determined that he sighed in response. In the end, he did lie down with his head on its flank. Not only was it fabulously warm, it was also softer than anything one could conjure out of leaves. There was a residual resistance in him that wanted to fight back, but his exhaustion was so powerful that it immediately took him to sleep.